Like a window into a universe that had always remained hidden, radio astronomy allowed everything beyond visible light, previously imperceptible, to be revealed to us. In radio waves, we had a new messenger that would tell us the invisible story of nature. With its birth in the 1930s, those radio signals emitted from the depths of space and time, eventually captured by primitive radio telescopes, led to the discovery of celestial bodies that we would never have known without them. However, it wasn't until the end of World War II that this new science entered its golden age. In the early 1950s, interest in radio astronomy escalated worldwide, leading major powers to invest vast sums of money in this medium to listen to the whispers of the darkness. Thus, in the context of the newly proclaimed space race between the United States and the Soviet Union for the conquest of space, with the firmly entrenched conviction of being leaders in science and engineering, the North American country allocated funds for the growth, expansion, and improvement of radio astronomy within its nation. Until that moment, everything we knew about the skies came from what light told us. Cosmic radio signals were going to gift us a new canvas, a new vision of the universe imprinted on invisible waves. Sounds that humanity had not yet heard. A new era for astronomy was germinating. Under this array of promises in 1956, the NSF, or National Science Foundation, decided to fund an ambitious project that a professor at Ohio State University believed would make the United States the nerve center of radio astronomy worldwide. American physicist John Krauss had designed a colossal radio telescope the size of 3 football fields that would continuously scan the skies for signals from deep space. Being one of the pioneers of the discipline and a highly respected figure in the community, he received funding of $250,000 for the construction of that radio telescope. Although modest compared to other projects of the same era, it allowed the official Ohio State University Radio Observatory, better known by its nickname Big Ear, to begin rising. The telescope that would listen to the invisible. Big Ear consisted of a large aluminum reflective surface measuring 150 by 100 meters. At one end rested a curved parabolic reflector, and at the opposite end, a flat reflector with the ability to tilt up and down. Midway between them, in the center of the surface, feed horns pointed towards the parabolic reflector. Its operation was based on the fact that when radio waves arrived from the sky and impacted the flat reflector, they traveled horizontally across the aluminum surface to the parabolic reflector, which by its shape reflected them towards the feed horns. Once there, the 2 receivers processed the signal and provided the detection results. Due to budget constraints, Big Ear could not be electronically controlled to map the sky at the scientists' will. It couldn't rotate left and right like other radio telescopes. It could only tilt up and down. But through the Earth's own rotation, they managed to overcome this obstacle. Built at the ideal angle for this, Big Ear took advantage of the world's spin on its axis to map almost the entire sky. Simply by tilting within its restricted mobility and waiting long enough, they could achieve an almost complete view of the firmament. The process took 5 years, and due to budget cuts, much of the labor ended up being volunteers and university students who wanted to be part of this dream. But finally, in 1961, construction was completed, making Big Ear one of the largest radio telescopes in the world. It was time to hunt for the signals the universe was sending us from the depths of space and time.
Big Ear entró en funcionamiento en 1963 para iniciar el conocido como High Sky Survey,
un proyecto que buscaba rastrear todas las fuentes naturales de radio en la galaxia. Durante 8 años lograron cartografiar el 70% del cielo, identificando más de 20.000 fuentes distintas. Habían creado un mapa de la parte invisible del firmamento con un enorme atractivo para astrónomos de todo el mundo. Sin embargo, en 1972 dejaron de recibir fondos, algo que podría haber representado el fin de Reappeared de no ser porque alguien vio en él una esperanza para dar con el descubrimiento más importante de la historia de la humanidad. While the planning for the construction of Big Ear and other contemporary radio telescopes was still in its early stages, rumors began to spread that this new generation of observatories would achieve sufficient sensitivity to detect potential alien transmissions. They could capture communications from a hypothetical civilization in our galaxy. Unlike other waves in the electromagnetic spectrum, radio waves travel very freely, hardly affected by interstellar dust and gas. It was reasonable to think that any civilization capable of communicating with others would use radio signals for this purpose. With these radio telescopes, we might be able to answer the eternal question of whether we are alone in the universe. Discovering that there is someone else out there would be the most important finding with the greatest philosophical implications in all of our history. We neither had to nor could wait for another form of life to contact us. We could search for the echoes of their existence among those invisible signals. With hopes more justified than ever, the young American astronomer Frank Drake organized a meeting to establish the foundations of an international project focused on using different radio telescopes around the world to analyze all those signals that could indicate the existence of intelligent extraterrestrial life. 10 scientists attended the meeting held in Green Bank in November 1961. Together, they established the foundations of what would be named SETI, the acronym for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. The attendees' optimism, supported by statistics, was immense. The Milky Way is an island of light composed of what could be more than 400 billion stars, nearly all of which have worlds orbiting around them. And our galaxy is just one of the 2 trillion that could be navigating the ocean of the observable universe. Given this inconceivable number of stars, there should also be an unimaginable number of habitable planets where the seed of life, just like on our home planet, could have found a place to germinate. And with galaxies being nearly as old as time itself, having had billions of years to flourish, it seemed unthinkable that intelligent life had not emerged elsewhere. For the 10 scientists, it was a certainty that at that precise moment radio signals from other civilizations were passing through the very room they were gathered in. The extraterrestrials were out there, whispering into the void of space. All we had to do was listen. And Drake believed he knew exactly what they should be listening for. How they should tune their signals with all that new generation of radio telescopes. Hydrogen is the most common element in the universe, the fundamental ingredient of nature's pillars, which at the same time emits a wonderful signal when in its lowest energy state. A property that emerges from the quantum realm could eventually lead to the discovery of alien communications. When the spin of the electron in neutral hydrogen changes from being aligned with the proton's angular momentum to being unaligned, the atom emits a photon with a wavelength of 21 centimeters. A spectral line with a frequency of exactly 1420 MHz, known as the hydrogen line. Any civilization that understands the fundamentals of quantum mechanics should know this special frequency, inherent to the most abundant element in the cosmos. And if there was a desire to communicate, it was a reasonable speculation to consider that they would be doing so at this frequency, universal and natural, perfect for being heard. recognizable by any form of life that has perfected the art of radio astronomy. SETI's foundations established that if we wanted to find signs of life, we should look for the radio frequency of hydrogen. Such was the scientific consensus on Drake's prediction that with the expansion of the project, the International Telecommunication Union assigned this band for purely scientific purposes. The use of the hydrogen line was restricted worldwide. No one could transmit on that frequency. The protection of 1420 MHz was meant to prevent human origin signals from interfering with astronomical observations. They wanted to ensure that detecting a radio signal with those characteristics had to have an extraterrestrial origin, and perhaps, if we were lucky enough, come from an intelligent civilization sending a message into the seas of darkness.
Viendo que podía ser su mejor baza en la búsqueda de vida extraterrestre, los líderes del SETI se interesaron por el Big Ear cuando este terminó con el proyecto de escaneo del cielo. De este modo, el radiotelescopio entraba en una nueva etapa en su vida. Ya no iba a buscar fuentes naturales de radio, iba a intentar cazar transmisiones de una civilización inteligente.
The radio signals captured by the detectors were automatically processed by the computers. However, with only 16 kilobytes of memory, a very limited capacity even by the standards of that time, they couldn't store even small amounts of data. Therefore, the measurements were printed directly onto paper in real time to be read later by project volunteers. This was manual work, without the help of any algorithm or computer program, to alert them to an interesting signal. These printed documents contained alphanumeric codes that symbolized the intensity variations in the signals that Big Ear captured from the skies. On the right side, there were 6 columns providing information about the coordinates being mapped at that moment, with each row representing 12 seconds of data collection. On the left side, there were a total of 50 columns, each representing the measurements for a specific channel or radio frequency in the spectrum. The numbers descending from them represented the strength of the signal being detected. These numbers ranged from 1, the lowest intensity, to 9. To save space and keep the columns to a single digit, thus making it easier for the volunteers to read, when the power exceeded 9, the alphabet was used. A was 10, B was 11, C was 12, and so on. Minute by minute, day by day, the endless sheets emerged from the computers. A tireless scan of the signals from the firmament.
De todos modos, la inmensa mayoría de las veces las señales estaban siempre entre el 1 y el 5, unos valores que representaban simplemente un ligero ruido de fondo de origen terrestre. Era muy extraño que llegáramos a las letras, hasta que 5 años después del inicio del proyecto captamos algo que no se parecía nada de lo que antes habíamos visto y que nunca hemos vuelto a ver. Una señal que daría lugar a medio siglo de especulaciones.
On Monday, August 15, 1977, in the midst of the silence of an empty and dark control room, Big Ear's IBM computer begins to print a results sheet. The radio telescope is listening to the depths of the Sagittarius constellation. Exactly at 11:26 p.m. on that summer night, a radio signal is detected by the receivers. For 72 seconds, Big Ear captures radio waves whose nature, reflected on that automatically printed page in the darkness of the room, was unlike anything we had heard before. The computer is perceiving the usual background noise when suddenly, the information from that signal enters the system. The first intensity value is a 6, relatively high. But 12 seconds later, with the next wave of data, the computer prints an E, 14 times the intensity of the background noise. Then, a Q, 26 times the intensity. Finally, it reaches its peak, showing a U. The signal has multiplied the background power by 30. then it drops to a J, and ultimately a 5 appears in the readings. After that, the signal has disappeared. For 72 seconds, Big Ear had captured an unprecedented radio signal. No one witnessed that moment, but in the midst of the solitude of the night, the evidence of its passage had been immortalized in those printouts. 3 days later, the sheets with the data from the past week were delivered to the home of one of the SETI volunteers. Ohio University professor Jerry Amon had offered to read through hundreds and hundreds of pages of numbers and letters in hopes of finding something interesting. And that summer morning, the moment he had been waiting for and doubting would ever come arrived. After several pages seeing small numbers linked to the typical ambient noise, when he reached the results of 11 p.m. on August 15th, he came across that sequence. 6EQJ5. It wasn't just that he had reached the alphabet, which rarely happened. It was that its peak, the U, was representing a signal 30 times more powerful than the background noise. He immediately realized that he was witnessing the most intense event in the history of radio astronomy. On pure instinct, amazed by the sequence, he circled it with his red pen, and beside it wrote the already historic scribble. The signal that would be baptized as the WOW signal had just been discovered.
Esto pasó en 1977, y si casi 50 años después seguimos hablando de ellas porque más allá de su intensidad, WOW reunía una serie de características que nunca han vuelto a repetirse. A día de hoy sigue siendo nuestro mejor candidato para una transmisión de radio de una civilización extraterrestre.
From the very beginning, it was clear that the WOW signal was unique. The leaders of SETI closely followed the study of its nature, and as soon as the team presented the results, a storm erupted within the community. The characteristics of WOW had no precedent. Rumors that it could be an alien signal began to slowly but steadily spread. First and foremost, and perhaps being the key feature, the WOW signal was narrowband. Big Ear had 50 detection channels, each with a bandwidth of 10 kHz. But the WOW signal was detected in only one of them, specifically in the second channel. This meant that the signal couldn't have a variation of more than 10 kHz. It was extremely narrow, which was very unusual in natural radio sources. Narrowband waves we know of always have their origin in technology. One astronomical origin of what is considered narrowband is found in the pulsar contained in the heart of the Crab Nebula. The neutron star rotates 30 times per second and emits all kinds of electromagnetic radiations into space, including radio waves. WOW was 100,000 times narrower than the signals from the pulsar. Except for an artificial transmitter that would confirm it was a message from an extraterrestrial civilization, we didn't know of any astronomical source that could create a signal with such a reduced bandwidth. Secondly, WOW showed perfect stability during the 72 seconds of observation. It moved across the sky at the same speed as the stars, suggesting its origin in the depths of the galaxy and not in any orbit close to Earth, and emitted with unusually long continuity. Radio signals from natural sources typically lasted only a few milliseconds. We were talking about 1 minute and 12 seconds of continuous signal. And third and finally, as if Drake's prophecy was materializing before their eyes, the frequency of the signal was practically identical to the hydrogen line. It was only 50 kHz above the frequency at which the SETI founders had theorized that a civilization with quantum knowledge would be emitting. In fact, that slight difference in hertz was consistent with the Doppler effect on the signal, if the transmitter were moving at a speed of 10 km per second, generating through this phenomenon an apparent frequency shift in the wave relative to us as observers. The WOW signal was found in the protected frequency of 1420 MHz. The final culmination of an analysis that, with each step, more related the signal to an artificial technology from the cosmos. All the characteristics were what we would expect from an extraterrestrial transmission in an ideal scenario.
Aún así, por las limitaciones del observatorio no podemos saber si era de frecuencia modulada, si había información codificada en la señal, algo que evidentemente confirmaría que tiene un origen en una civilización extraterrestre. Pero es que además realmente no podemos saber de dónde vino exactamente. Cada detector abarcaba una gran región del cielo, unos 20 minutos de arco, lo que equivaldría a una zona del firmamento de 2/3 el tamaño de la Luna. Pero es que además ni siquiera podemos saber cuál de los dos detectores captó la señal, porque no quedó registrado en ningún sitio. Aún así, todas estas incógnitas no impidieron que la señal WOW desencadenara un huracán mediático en todo el mundo.
With all the evidence in hand and perhaps an excessive excitement, John Krause, the director of the observatory, drafted a press release that reached the country's major media outlets, detailing the discovery of the WOW signal and stating that its origin strongly suggested a radio transmission from an extraterrestrial intelligence. But that little else could be known about it without further exhaustive studies. Immediately, the news grabbed headlines and front pages in national and international media. For the first time in history, we had come across a signal that could come from a civilization beyond our home. The whispers of another form of life that, like us, had mastered the art of telecommunications. Many took for granted that we had finally answered the question of whether we are alone in the universe. Through the WOW signal, we had confirmation that there was someone else out there, that someone was showing signs of their presence. However, soon all this enthusiasm faded away. Both Big Ear and many of the world's best radio telescopes turned their gaze to the portion of the sky from which the signal originated. For a total of 100 days they listened to the void, but all they found was silence. The WOW signal never appeared again. In the years following its discovery, it was recognized as one of the most significant events in the history of the search for intelligent life, with many still considering it the best evidence to date of contact with the echoes of an extraterrestrial civilization, but with many others questioning this optimism. The Big Ear radio telescope continued its tireless search for signals of possible extraterrestrial origin, until in 1995 the owners sold the land to build a housing development and a golf course. In the 22 years it was in search of echoes of intelligent life, it never again came across a signal remotely similar to WOW, a signal that seemed destined to remain an unresolved mystery.
Sin una segunda observación nunca podremos resolver las dudas sobre su origen. Es verdad que sigue siendo la señal de banda estrecha más intensa captada jamás, pero esa no es la evidencia extraordinaria que necesitaríamos para una afirmación tan extraordinaria. Y hoy, 47 años después, todo lo que tenemos sigue siendo eso: 72 segundos para desvelar su naturaleza.
Since that summer night in 1977, many hypotheses have tried to explain the origin of the WOW signal. And although the excitement about the possibility of it being truly an extraterrestrial communication may never completely disappear, other theories have had to be considered to explain the results without involving something that requires evidence we didn't have and will never have. One scenario that was considered at the time was a failure in the central computer of the radio observatory. A sudden issue in the computer that led to processing results for a signal that never existed. However, after the observation, all of Big Ear's computer programs were analyzed, and no fault was found. In fact, in the 22 years that followed, during which it continued to operate, no errors were ever detected. Not to mention that if it were indeed a glitch, given the evolution of the signal curve over time, with that perfect bell shape, we would be facing an almost impossible coincidence. The WOW signal was real. What the radio telescope captured had the properties that were printed. Understanding that no computer glitch was behind it and that something came from space, the next logical step was to consider that the origin was in our own technology, whether through interference with a terrestrial radio frequency or from the emissions of artificial satellites. However, both scenarios collapsed under their own weight. The WOW signal was found at a frequency of 1420 MHz, a frequency that had been strictly restricted since the 1960s. Precisely to protect that channel we assumed would be used by an extraterrestrial civilization. No communication system on Earth can transmit at that frequency. Furthermore, the WOW signal was never repeated. We never heard it again. If it had originated from a terrestrial source, someone somewhere would have heard it again. In the scenario of emissions from artificial satellites interfering with the detectors, we faced the same problem, protecting the frequency of the hydrogen line. But furthermore, at that time, barely 300 satellites orbited the world, and none of them were navigating over the area of Big Ear on the night of the detection. Even considering that one emitted signals at that restricted radio frequency and that the given orbit paths were incorrect, and indeed at that moment one flew over the radio telescope, the satellite in question would have had to be moving in the exact direction and at the precise speed to match its movement with that of the stars in the sky. Because one of the few things we were certain of is that the signal moved with the stars. A cluster of coincidences so unreal that it left the theory of human interference as a very poor explanation for the mystery.
Pero desechando todas las teorías que intentaban conectar nuestro mundo con la señal, tuvimos que hallar su origen más allá del imperio del Sol. Era una certeza casi absoluta que fuera cual fuera su cuna, esta debía descansar en algún lugar en las profundidades de la galaxia, en el corazón de los monstruos que surcan los océanos de oscuridad.
When a massive star exhausts its fuel and perishes in its final breath as a supernova, its core undergoes an unstoppable gravitational collapse. In the most massive ones, this collapse can fracture the fabric of space-time, leading to the formation of a singularity and the birth of a black hole. But there are some that linger at the threshold of darkness. If its mass is not sufficient to break that fabric but enough to tear apart atoms, something unique emerges from the dust. The star has left a fierce memory of its existence, a corpse composed of the densest material in the universe, an entity we call a neutron star. A tiny sphere of light with a mass similar to that of the Sun but condensed into a diameter of just 10 kilometers. A density so unimaginably high that it makes them beasts with a gravitational power 200 billion times greater than that of Earth. These stellar corpses often give signals of their presence, becoming beacons that shed light on the seas of darkness. As a result of gravitational collapse, neutron stars rotate incredibly fast, so fast that some can reach the point of no return. When they rotate at 20% of the speed of light, everything changes. Rotating more than 700 times per second, beams of energy are generated emanating from each of the star's magnetic poles. And if its rotational axis is not perfectly aligned, the beams will trace circles with each turn. The neutron star has evolved to become a pulsar, a furious beast from which jets of radiation in the range of X-rays, gamma radiation, and what interested in this mystery, radio waves emanate. One of the most studied theories at the time was that the cradle of the WOW signal could rest in one of these pulsars. In fact, when they were first discovered in 1967 through their periodic radio emissions, the team behind the discovery first believed they had established contact with an extraterrestrial civilization. The radiation beams of pulsars are detectable from Earth as periodic radio pulses when it rotates and the jets point towards us. But precisely this characteristic that in 1967 confirmed that the discoverers were facing a natural phenomenon did not work with the WOW signal. The radio pulses of pulsars are extremely regular, so much so that they are considered the clocks of the universe. Their hands always move to the same beat. The WOW signal was a unique pulse that never repeated. No matter how much we searched in the region, no other signal reached us. If a beacon was sending us messages, we would have found it. Likewise, the duration of 72 seconds, considering that the pulses received from these stellar corpses last only a few milliseconds, left the pulsar hypothesis in no man's land. At that moment, other monsters of the universe came into play. All paths seemed to lead to the Guardians of Darkness, to the place where all roads end. The hypothesis was emerging that the cradle of the WOW signal lay within the depths of a supermassive black hole. When these entities devour matter, a accretion disk forms around them. Not all gas and dust attracted by its gravitational tyranny ends up precipitating towards its singularity. Trapped by its jaws, the material accelerates to speeds close to that of light, so fast that not even the gravity of the dark beast can retain it. Inevitably, all that power has to escape. When that boundary is crossed, two beams of ultra-hot gas emerge from the black hole, releasing a jet of particles that travel almost at the speed of light. The monster, releasing all that devastation it has accumulated in its kingdom, is emitting enormous amounts of energy across the electromagnetic spectrum. A quasar is born, roaring from the depths of space and time. It seemed plausible that the WOW signal was one of these extremely luminous active galactic nuclei. Unlike the pulsar, its origin would not be within our galaxy. The cradle would lie on another island of light billions of light years away, a relic from the dawn of the universe. At first glance, quasars solved the problem of periodicity of pulses, whose radio pulses arrived periodically at millisecond intervals. Quasars emit radiation continuously, and its intensity varies slowly over time. However, this measurable variability occurs on much longer timescales, of days, weeks, and even years. WOW lasted 72 seconds, where it very quickly went from being undetectable to reaching its peak, and then disappearing completely. Also, the emission of quasars covers a very wide range of frequencies. If it were one of these beasts, it could not be centered on a frequency as particular as that of 1420 MHz, and as narrow that its variance did not exceed 10 kHz. Neither pulsars nor quasars, the two main suspects, gave us the answers we were looking for. We needed something in between, a unique and brief event. And of all the known astronomical phenomena, we only had one card left to play. We had to travel to the heart of a god of light. Stars are factories of complexity, furnaces that create the elements that weave the fabric of the universe. Starting from hydrogen, which they fuse to form helium, they gradually mold heavier elements, until they reach iron. That's the end of the road. When it reaches that core of iron, the star has poisoned itself. For the first time in that sequence, its fusion no longer releases energy. There is nothing to prevent gravitational collapse anymore. With no nuclear reactions fighting against it, gravity precipitates all the trillions of tons of gas toward that corrupted core. In those iron entrails, pressure grows exponentially until an expansive wave is triggered, shining for a few seconds brighter than an entire galaxy, releasing radiation across the electromagnetic spectrum, including radio waves. The outer layers have been expelled. the star has died in the form of a supernova. This stellar cataclysm is a unique event, just like the WOW signal. Over the years, the theory that a supernova in our galaxy was responsible for this puzzling signal gained strength and remains an important candidate. But there are still gaps in the hypothesis. The radio emissions from a supernova tend to last from days to months, a much longer time than the 72 seconds of WOW. Similarly, the light curve of supernovas shows a gradual increase and decrease, radically different from the swift evolution of our signal. At the same time, even assuming that a stellar explosion was behind it, by observing that region of the sky, we would have found visible echoes. Supernovas leave a memory of their existence in the form of a colossal nebula. We have never found the debris of that devastation in the constellation of Sagittarius. With this final setback, many years passed without any new explanation for the origin of the WOW signal, reinforcing all theories about its connection to an extraterrestrial civilization. It wasn't until 2007 that we found, finally, a new path to follow. A team of astronomers working at the Parkes Radio Telescope in Australia detected a brief and extremely energetic pulse of radio emissions. A unique event that lasted only a few milliseconds, and whose dispersion suggested an extragalactic origin. They had just discovered the first case of what would be dubbed a fast radio burst, or FRB. In the following years, several observatories began systematically searching for these signals, demonstrating that these bursts were recurrent phenomena in the universe, although their origin was unknown. The community soon wondered if these phenomena could be behind the WOW signal, discovered 30 years earlier. They had a new unique event emitting an incredibly intense radio pulse. A new hope arose to solve the mystery. But first, they had to decipher the origin of these fast radio bursts, and all eyes turned to one of the most mysterious and powerful celestial bodies. By mechanisms that are still unclear, some neutron stars evolved to become what we know as magnetars, objects with the strongest magnetic field in the universe, capable even of fracturing their own crust and generating stellar earthquakes. Magnetars have a magnetic field billions of times stronger than that of Earth, able to tear apart the atoms of anything that approaches them. These monsters emit intense X-ray and gamma rays, driven by their titanic magnetic poles. And they should also experience high-energy explosions, leading to the emission of a fast radio burst with enough force to cross the oceans of darkness between galaxies. The possibility was being raised that the WOW signal was the echoes of a magnetar roaring from the depths of space and time. However, magnetars were not the only candidates for these radiation bursts. Their origin could rest in the cruelest battle in the universe, a war between the corrupted hearts of what were once stars. It all started with neutron stars and must end with them. These stellar corpses silently navigate the seas of space, waiting for the moment to avenge the martyrdom to which they were subjected. Waiting for the moment when that memory of what was once a god can finally rest. And there are moments when through war they find the peace they seek. United by a gravitational destiny, two sisters can meet amidst the darkness. Two neutron stars trapped under a common center of mass. And in the most devastating cosmic dance, when they have approached more than nature allows, both sisters will collide, exploding in one of the most violent phenomena in the universe. A kilonova has just germinated. Two neutron stars merging to erupt with much more power than any supernova. A burst of gamma rays, visible light, and probably one of those fast radio bursts. both magnetars and kilonovas were plausible explanations for those pulses, and therefore seemed strong candidates to explain the natural origin of the WOW signal. However, pending more advanced studies on phenomena that we still do not understand, we must be cautious about asserting that relationship. All the fast radio bursts we have captured so far are extremely brief, from milliseconds to a few seconds at most. For now, the 72 seconds seem like too long a time for WOW to be behind. Likewise, all those captured have been broadband signals with a specific dispersion indicative of their journey through intergalactic space. WOW was narrowband, and despite limitations in its observation, there are no records of the typical dispersion associated with fast radio bursts. For all these reasons, the consensus is that it is likely that they were different radio astronomical phenomena. More recently, in 2017, bringing the WOW signal back into the media spotlight, astronomer Antonio Paris published an article in the Journal of the Washington Academy of Sciences offering a new explanation for the Enigma. The scientist suggested that the cradle of that signal rested in the emissions of comet 266P/Christensen. Discovered in June 2006, it is a periodic comet of the Solar System which, according to Paris's calculations, was in the region of the sky where the WOW signal was detected that summer of 1977 and hypothesized could have been its true source. When comets approach the Sun, they heat up enough for their nucleus to sublime. The ice of these relics, returning from the cold distances of the solar empire, turns into gas, forming an atmosphere around them that by the energy of the parent star ionizes, generating its own light and creating the famous tail of a comet. According to his theory, 266P/Christensen would have released hydrogen gas that, victim of that bombardment of solar energy, would have emitted radio waves at a frequency of, obviously, those 1420 MHz. The astronomer claimed that this cometary origin solved all the enigmas of the signal, both the frequency in the hydrogen line and the duration of 72 seconds, the time it remained in the listening range of the radio telescope. Paris's theory generated a lot of media buzz, and although many outlets claimed that, with it, the mystery was closed, it did not at all achieve consensus within the scientific community. We have monitored hundreds of comets, and not a single one emits radio waves with the intensity that we captured with WOW. None releases enough hydrogen to make something like that happen. Furthermore, the mere presence of hydrogen wasn't evidence of anything. We're talking about the most abundant element in the universe. If it emitted frequencies like the one we detected so easily, we would be capturing WOW signals practically every day. And since 1977, we haven't done so. We also couldn't forget that the signal was detected only in one of the two antennas of Big Ear. If it had been a comet sailing around the Sun, the second detector should have intercepted its radio signal. And it didn't. Not to mention that WOW showed no signs of movement, which would be basic if its origin were a comet. To this day, skepticism still surrounds Paris's theory, and due to the lack of solid observational evidence, the ease with which some claim it to be the final explanation to the Enigma, it is considered a highly controversial theory in the community. Despite all the paths we've explored, crossing the boundaries of space and time to find an explanation to that message, time and time again we've returned to square one.
Han sido 47 años intentando encontrar la explicación a la única señal que de verdad ha roto el silencio del universo. Todas las teorías nos han acercado y al mismo tiempo nos han alejado de la verdad. Así que a día de hoy solo hay dos escenarios posibles. La señal WOW es un mensaje de una civilización extraterrestre conviviendo en nuestra isla de luz, o son los ecos de un fenómeno astronómico totalmente desconocido para la ciencia. Así que realmente, sea cual sea la solución, y aunque esta señal esté destinada a permanecer como un misterio para siempre, nos debe motivar a seguir observando y escuchando lo que se esconde más allá del cielo.